Hey everyone, welcome back for a new episode of Somos Lehigh Valley, a podcast that's presented by the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. My name is AJ Suero. I'm the board chair for the Hispanic Chamber. And on this week's episode, we have a very special guest that you may recognize, someone who's been out in the community and has worked on behalf of the community. It is Susan Wild. She joins us next, right here on Somos Lehigh Valley.
¡18 de mayo! Downtown Allentown. Vamos a cerrar la calle Hamilton para una fiesta. Valley Health Partner presenta Fiesta on Hamilton. Este será el festival latino más grande de todo Pennsylvania y será completamente gratis. En tarima de Venezuela, los adolescentes.
Me tengo que ir porque Dios te hizo tan bella. Eres tú.
De República Dominicana, Raúl Acosta y Oro Sólido.
Ok. Mujeres. María se fue.
De Puerto Rico, Rumba Caliente. De República Dominicana, el grupo de ahora.
Y a mí me gusta como mueve la colota. Y a mí me gusta como mueve.
Y muchos más. Este será el festival latino más grande en la historia de todo el Valle Lehigh. Y es gratis. Domingo 18 de mayo, desde la 1 de la tarde, completamente gratis. Con el auspicio de Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce, la ciudad de Allentown y La Mega.
Are you a content creator? Do you want to be one? Maybe you have a YouTube channel, an Instagram, a Facebook, a TikTok. Maybe you have a great idea for a new channel, but you don't have the time, the equipment, or the space. Well, we have a solution for you. Welcome to Master Studios. Here at Master Studios, you have everything you need. Lights, cameras, microphones, and a fully equipped set ready for you to start creating. And the best part is that you don't have to do it alone. Our professional team is here to help. All you have to do is bring your ideas. We have over 10 unique studio sets for you to choose the right one for your content. Whether you need a modern talk show vibe, a sleek podcast setting, or a dynamic background video, we got you covered. You want to edit your own video? No problem. We'll record it and give you the files. You want us to produce your videos? We got you. We got graphics, lower thirds, seamless cuts. We'll make sure your video stands out. Master Studios is right here in downtown Allentown, and we are waiting for you. Are you ready to turn that content idea into a reality? Well, check out our website, mstudiogroup.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Somos Lehigh Valley. We're so excited that you're with us. As always, we remind you that you can follow the Hispanic Chamber. We are on LinkedIn and on Facebook and Instagram. Look for HCCLV, where you can follow and learn all about all of the events that we're doing throughout the months of May, June, July, and further on into the year. As I had mentioned before, we have a very special guest with us this week. For 7 years, she was our representative in Washington, D.C. for the 7th Congressional District, and she's joining us today for a conversation. It is Susan Wild, our good friend. Good to see you, Susan. Thanks again for coming on the podcast.
You, and it's good to be here and to be in downtown Allentown. I haven't been down here for a while, so it's been great. I was walking around and just admiring the sights. It's fun.
Yep. And you've been so instrumental in getting Allentown to the place where it is now, right? We were talking before about the fact that when I moved here in 2004, and I think you go even further back, downtown didn't look anything like it does right now, did it?
I think downtown, when I first moved here, probably looked better than when you first moved here. I moved here in 1987. So we still had Hess's department store and Lay's department store, and they were the flagships of downtown. But we were starting to see signs of, and once those two stores left, it really became a bit of a ghost town for quite a while. My law office was always down here. So I remember there were years when we just brown bagged for lunch because there was no place open or no place to go for lunch. And now it's, really, it looks great.
There's so many great places.
Very exciting.
Yeah,
it's really nice.
Yesterday, I was actually at one of the newer places. I don't know if you've had a chance to go there, Rosa Blanca.
I've heard. I haven't been yet, but I will,
Susan,
for sure.
You've got to go.
Okay, maybe I'll go with you and your lovely wife.
Let's do it. I mean, they've got this amazing, it's almost like Gaiocho, Miami vibe.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely recommend, we can talk about that later.
Okay.
But Susan, just getting back to you, you had just mentioned that obviously you had been in law, previously, and everybody knows that after law, you went into, legislation. So I'm just wondering, for those of us who perhaps aren't as familiar with your early journey, what is it that led you from saying, hey, I'm going to go from my day job to representing, our constituents in Washington, D.C.?
So I have to say, to really explain my evolution to serving in Congress, I have to go back to when I first moved to the Lehigh Valley in 1987. Little did I ever think at that point that I was going to end up representing this area. When I moved here, as I often say, I was kicking and screaming. I had just started my legal career in Maryland. I wasn't anxious to upset it, but my husband had been recruited for a job at Rodale. And so I grudgingly said yes, as long as we only stay for 2 years. And here we are in 2025. That was 1987. And what happened was, after less than a year, I realized I really liked the area. I still didn't think this was going to be like where I was going to stay the rest of my life. But then, life happens. And I was very happy with my legal career. And I found this to be a very livable place. I had moved, the part of Maryland we lived in was in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Traffic even then was awful, commute. And 22 wasn't as bad in 1987 as it is now. So It seemed like a much easier lifestyle. And we were thinking about having kids. And that was a big part of it. I thought, well, do I really want to be working an hour from home when I have kids? So we stayed for a little while longer. My kids were born here in 1993 and 1996. They went K to 12 public schools in the Lehigh Valley, and I've been here ever since. So to get to your question, I realized along the way how much this area meant to me. I had grown up in an Air Force family, so we moved a lot.
Little known fact, you were actually born in Germany.
I was born on an Air Force base in Germany.
I did my homework.
Good for you. And what was then Wiesbaden Air Force Base. And we had moved so much that, to tell you the truth, I had never enjoyed the luxury, I'm going to call it, of having roots somewhere.
Yeah.
So after I had been here for a while, and certainly once my kids were born, I came to realize I could really establish roots here. And I did. And this is definitely home. I mean, I've lived here longer than I've ever lived anywhere in my life. And so I just grew to really appreciate this area in a way that I'm not sure somebody who's born and raised here could even understand, because they might take it more for granted, know? And so I was very committed to the area. And then along about 2017, the congressional seat became open, or was about to become open, because Charlie Dent announced that he was going to retire from Congress. And I had long thought about running for office. I had actually run for Lehigh County Commissioner in 2013 unsuccessfully. And so I decided to get in the race. And once I got to Congress, my love of this area only grew. You know, everybody knows their own neighborhood or their own township or their usual places. But once you're in Congress and you're representing the entire Lehigh Valley area, known as Pennsylvania 7, and really got to know the whole area, I just grew to really appreciate this area.
And you truly were representing the whole area because you had Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton.
Yeah, those were the cities. But then I had the Slate Belt.
Yeah.
After the 2020 census, they added Carbon County. Before that, I had a big piece of Monroe County. And, you know, there's a lot of rural parts of the Lehigh Valley. And it just, it was eye-opening because so much of my life had been in the Lehigh Valley had been confined to the cities, Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You know, as part of your work in Congress, obviously you sought to obtain funds for a lot of the projects that we all know that happened during those 7 years you were in office. You know, a lot of the development downtown here in Allentown, a lot of the development in Bethlehem. What are some of the projects that you take the most pride in being able to support?
Well, thank you. I mean, the downtown area of Allentown really started being developed as part of the NIS, which was
totally separate.
That was totally separate. But I will tell you that when I was fortunate in my second 2 years in Congress, that we brought back what used to be called earmarks.
So was that 20 to 22?
Wait a minute. I have to think now. It actually might have been in 2020, right around the time of COVID.
Okay.
And we brought back what used to be called earmarks, which is where legislators can literally bring home the bacon to their district. But they had gotten a bad name because in the old days, there wasn't a lot of transparency. A lot of legislators were getting money.
Money would sit in certain places.
Yeah, or for their own special projects or something like that. It didn't really benefit their whole area.
Yeah.
So there were new rules put in place. They were renamed community project funding. And the whole idea behind them was they had to benefit a community. It didn't have to be the whole Lehigh Valley, but it had to be a community that would benefit. And so it was very exciting. I was, over the years that we had those, I was able to bring back money for multiple police departments, including most recently the Allentown Police Department, to improve. I think we got them $1 million to work on some of their drug initiatives. We got lots of money for things like roads and bridges that needed to be repaired. But we also, I was able to get money for community bike works, and organizations like that. There were a couple of organizations that were building new homes for homeless folks, unsheltered folks. And the community bike works one was a favorite for me because it was very geared towards children, because what it does, and at that time, I think it was only in Easton, and the money that we got for it allowed it to expand throughout the valley, but they connect young people, let's just say, with the organization, and they take a bike. It might not be the kid's own bike. It might be a bike that's been donated. And there's people on staff there who will teach them how to repair and maintain their bike. And then the bike becomes theirs. So it provides a lot of young people with a means of transportation. And it's just, and self-reliance and that kind of thing. So I always loved that one. We got money for the Boys and Girls Club. I mean, there's just a lot of things that, and people, by the way, organizations had to apply. Yeah. It wasn't like I just got to hand out, I didn't just get to go around town with a checkbook. You had to apply. It was a very rigorous process. We only were allowed 10 the first couple of years, then it expanded to 15 that could be awarded, and we would get somewhere around 100 applications.
Well, and that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that, Congress people and even representatives, they're bombarded with all these different projects in their region. So there has to be some type of a mechanism in place for you to be able to do it fairly, right?
But one of the nice things about community project funding was that it was up to the member of Congress to connect with their community and really understand what the needs were, as opposed to some faceless agency in Washington just saying, okay, let's give, Allentown, Pennsylvania, this money. You really focused on what the needs were, and that was brought to you by your constituents.
Yeah. Susan, we've got a special guest that has been wanting to kind of support you.
Been kind of the paparazzi.
Be your
noise,
cheerleader.
yeah.
So why don't you introduce her?
All right. Let me introduce, and most people probably know her. Zoe, come here. Zoe.
Oh, there she is.
Zoe.
Hey.
Zoe, the Congress dog, while I was in Congress. She's very social. She loves people.
Hey, Zoe.
And she's been sitting over there kind of yipping while we've been talking. So
I think she's been fact checking.
Maybe so. That's true. Well, actually, she's not sure why she's not on camera instead of me. She's always considered herself the more important of the two of us.
This is definitely going to boost the ratings on the podcast.
And she actually used to come to Congress with me every time I was there, and she was in the office, and she would greet constituents. So anyway, and now she'll settle down because she's sitting with me. So should I go back to my connection to the?
Actually, let's talk about that.
Okay.
You have a connection with the Hispanic community here. I think a lot of that stems from the fact that you've been willing to go and meet folks out in Puerto Rico. I think you've been to the Dominican Republic as well. How have those experiences been able to shape your understanding of the culture and the constituents at large?
So before I even got to Congress, I was the city solicitor in Allentown, meaning the general counsel, for people who aren't familiar with the term solicitor. But I knew, based on that experience, that the Allentown was a majority Hispanic city, and I had a lot of interaction with the Hispanic community long before I came to Congress. But so I felt that it was really, really important, first of all, to honor that, to recognize the importance of the Hispanic culture here, and to incorporate it into the work that I did in Congress. So the trip that we were just talking about to Puerto Rico, the first time I went to Puerto Rico as a member of Congress was after the earthquakes.
Yeah.
And there were a delegation.
I was down there.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, but I was working for the Red Cross at the time.
So I went with the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee down there to survey the damage because we were being asked for appropriations. Yeah. I wasn't on that committee, but I asked to go because I had such a significant Puerto Rican population in my district. And so that was truly eye-opening. And it was a few days and really, it was devastating to see
Ponce, Yauco, that entire area down there.
But then when I was offered an opportunity, not with members of Congress, but with a group of locals from the Lehigh Valley who were going to Puerto Rico, yourself.
I wasn't supposed to go on that trip, actually. So Tony Iannelli was supposed to go on that trip. And at the last minute, he had to have some surgery. So he asked me to step in. So thank you, Tony, for the opportunity to step in.
Tony's a good guy too, but it really worked. So, and Mayor Turk was on that. I think Victor organized the trip, and Cynthia Mota went, and a few others. And when we went down there, one of the things we were really interested in was trying to get a direct route from San Jose to
from San Juan to Lehigh Valley. Yep,
to the Lehigh Valley, and so we spent time in meetings talking to their chamber, your counterparts,
my counterpart
there. And we had a lot of business meetings, and it was very, very, and I got to meet you, which was nice because we had never met before, and it really was important to me to do that trip because so many of the people here in the Lehigh Valley have their roots in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
They're going to live here for the rest of their lives, probably, but they have family there, family who came from there. And then, of course, after Hurricane Maria, so many people from the island came to the Lehigh Valley.
Yeah, specifically to the Lehigh Valley.
Before the hurricanes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of those people stayed. And I remember there was a strain on the Allentown School District because they weren't expecting this influx of new students, but we adapted. And so I just thought that trip was incredibly important as a part of my representation.
Yes. Yeah, we got the full experience on that trip because we, like you said, we did meetings with folks. We got to experience the food and the culture. But, we also had flown in and were delayed in getting out. I mean, we had to.
Yes.
I know that in
I
the
think
mayor's.
you slept in the airport.
Matt and I slept
You
on
and
the
the
airport
mayor
floor.
slept on the airport
Let me
floor.
tell you, folks, if you're from Allentown and you're doubting that your mayor works, I saw Matt Turk work a computer on the floor of the
Literally
airport.
slept
Because there were straight
linoleum
winds.
floor.
There were straight winds up here, so there was power outages and all these types of things. He was literally on his computer, on his phone, sleeping on an airport floor. So that just goes to show how glorious the
it was real glamorous, and,
5-star all the way.
Right.
5-star all the way. But Susan, obviously you've spent 7 years serving the Lehigh Valley and PA7. And then 2024 happens, right? We have presidential election and several other positions, including yours, that were up for re-election. I remember that the last time I'd seen you before today, actually, was on election night, and we were kind of all sitting around, waiting around and seeing what was going to happen. And it seemed like the night was taking a certain turn. Walk me through what that was like, that night and the days after.
Right. So last election day in 2024, I was running for my 4th term in Congress. I had survived some very difficult elections. This is
very close ones.
It's known as a swing district.
Yeah.
There are only 20 some in the entire United States. Most districts are safe red or blue.
Yeah.
But ours is one of the ones that's considered a battleground. And so my races were close, expensive, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And, but I was feeling pretty good going into election day about my own race. I wasn't necessarily feeling good about Democrats' chances in general.
Yep.
We had a lot of problems at the top of the ticket, as you know.
Yeah.
The transition from Biden to Harris. And I was very concerned about how the rest of the ticket would perform. I was not concerned about Senator Casey, I will say that. And ultimately, he also lost his election.
Yeah.
So I have to say that having come through some very difficult elections and also having more years of experience under my belt, I'd be lying if I didn't say that it was a bit of a shock to lose. I didn't lose by a lot. I've since done a lot of thinking about it and also talking with my campaign team and so forth. There were a few factors that were really important. One was that Donald Trump was on the ticket again, and he had enjoyed a resurgence of popularity among his base. The GOP had done an outstanding job of registering new voters in Pennsylvania. I don't know if anybody was really following the news, but the Republican registrations in Pennsylvania were increasing much more quickly than Democratic registrations over the course of the whole election year. And we were watching
that. Even included the Hispanic community, which a lot of us weren't aware of.
Well, and that's another whole part of this. But Democrats still outnumbered Republicans, but not by a lot. So I think those early registrations that they as a party paid attention to early in the year, I'm not talking about a few weeks out from the election, really paid off in dividends for the GOP and for Donald Trump. I attribute my loss more to the fact that Trump was on the ticket than to anything else.
Do you think it was a trickle-down effect?
I think that those new registrations came through for Donald Trump because they were people that were solidly his base. And these were new people voting that had not previously voted for me. I actually enjoyed, after my first election and subsequent elections, enjoyed a lot of Republican support, moderate Republican support. And I think that what we weren't expecting was this increase in the Trump base turning out. And there was some reduction of Democratic turnout throughout the Lehigh Valley, which I mostly attribute to the top of the ticket and some lack of enthusiasm there. So yeah, it was hard, but it wasn't as hard for me as it was for some of my family and for some of my friends and constituents who seemed really upset. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was upset. I have to say this. I absolutely loved the job. I loved representing this area in Congress, and it was the most fulfilling experience I had ever had in my adult life.
Well, to that point, I mean, a few of us had the opportunity to visit DC back in beginning of 24. And the first thing we did was we went to go look for your office, because we had this sense of pride of like, here's this woman who's, amazing, who's representing us, in DC. And I can remember being at the Capitol, Dominicans on the Hill event.
Adriano
and you gave us a shout out. We're at the back of the room. We're like,
from New York would always do Dominicans on the Hill every year. And I would always be there. And I remember I would always be on the stage and say, okay. And it was packed auditorium from all over the country. And I would always say, okay, who's here from the Lehigh Valley? And
there was a bunch of us in the back there.
Would always wave and say hi.
Had the flag out, the whole thing.
It was really nice.
It was great. So obviously turn the page and we're in a new year and we're living in a different world, in a different reality. What is it that you're up to these days, Susan? I think that's what a lot of people are kind of wondering because, you kind of dropped that aside and, you took time for yourself, which I think many of us did after, a very tumultuous fall. But what have you been up to?
Well, first of all, I had to finish out my term, which didn't end until January 3rd.
That's true, because there's a job to go back to the day after.
I was still in Washington. There were votes and that kind of thing going on. But I had sort of promised myself after the election that I would give myself the month of January and just decompress, relax.
Catch up on episodes of whatever you were binging.
Cook, not take off my pajamas, things like that. It turned out that January was actually very busy with a lot of incoming just communications. So I didn't take as much time as I wanted. So what I have done, and what I've been doing is exploring ways that I can continue to work in advocacy and work to make Pennsylvania 7, the Lehigh Valley, even better than it already is. I think there are a lot of opportunities to do that in the private sector, and in the philanthropic and charitable sector. And I'm very, very concerned about many of our nonprofits and our charitable organizations that do so much here in the Lehigh Valley, especially with the deep cuts that the Trump administration is making to federal funding for those kinds of organizations. And so I've committed myself to finding places where I can be helpful, where I can use my still public platform. There are a couple of organizations that I've committed to raising some money for, and I'm going to tap into my donor network from when I was in. That's the least fun part of the whole job in Congress is that you have to raise a lot of money.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be as hard when I'm raising it for an organization that I think really does a good job here in the Lehigh Valley as it is calling for your campaign. And I'm just trying to remain very, very involved without the chaos of what's going on in Washington, without having to travel down there every week. I still go to Washington pretty regularly. I have a lot of very, very good friends from in Congress who still are there, and I like to see them. But I'm just recommitting myself to trying to help this area.
It's interesting that you kind of shared about the fact that you're still working on helping people, even though you don't officially carry a title anymore. But I think a lot of that stems from the fact that leaders lead regardless of whether they're recognized or not. I guess for those who are sitting out there that would like to glean off of your experience a little, what's one major lesson you would say that serving the 7th has taught you over the last 7 years? Is there some profound or maybe not so profound, nugget that you would share with folks, especially those who are in leadership and looking to lead people?
So my overall summary of my perceptions of the Lehigh Valley as a result of my time in Congress are some of these things I already knew, but it really just crystallized for me. This is a very hardworking area. There are a lot of entrepreneurs, small business people who are kind of inventing what they are going to do, as well as some great manufacturing companies and some really giant companies. We were fortunate a number of years ago to have Olympus relocate to the Lehigh Valley, and
they've reinvented themselves while they've been here.
And put its corporate headquarters here and so forth. And we've got 2 great hospital networks, so there was a lot already here in terms of making this a good place to live. But what I did come to realize more in my time in Congress is, and this is probably not unique to the Lehigh Valley, it's happening across the country. There are still a lot of people that are being left out of the success. There are a lot of people who are having to struggle more than they should. There are school districts that are not getting the benefit that some of the other school districts are getting simply because their property tax base is not as good. And that kind of thing, when you represent the whole area, you have the ability to see what's happening in one part versus another part. And it really brings home how unequal life can be for a lot of people. And so that is what I want to remain committed to trying to fix, whether it's people having the ability to take advantage of these great hospitals and be able to afford great medical care, or whether it's improving the standards of education, not just the standards, but the funding for education so that the school districts can be relatively equal in terms of what they offer to their students, or supporting small businesses and young people who want to strike out on their own and create something. And I think those are the things that sometimes get lost in the shuffle. We hear a lot about our big companies and our big hospitals, and we know they're doing well. We know they're succeeding. But what you might not hear about is the small business person. I was just on the phone with one yesterday who opens a retail outlet in a mall and is struggling to pay the rent. And the feelings that everybody's having of higher costs of living and so forth, those trickle down, as you know. And the first people that are going to feel it are small businesses, because the people that would have spent money in their establishment are less likely to spend money in their establishment. And so those are the things that I just really want. And we are so fortunate here. We have got an amazing business class, but also an amazing philanthropic class of people who really are committed, some of them who have lived here their entire lives and have done very, very well for themselves. But they have a heart. They've got a heart, but they also have a wallet to put behind that
next
heart,
to the heart,
which is really nice. And I don't know that all districts have that. I've been and even when I was bringing resources back to the Lehigh Valley, so often it meant that we had to combine with somebody in the private sector, a public-private partnership to make something happen, because I couldn't bring all the money that was needed for whatever. And somebody would come in from the private sector and help.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of partnerships.
It really is.
That, you're standing at the 18,000 foot level and you're seeing the problem, but you're also seeing all of the particular contributors that could potentially help.
I have to say, the people I admire the most are the ones who have become successful. They may have a lot of money, but they are still thinking about their community. They're not just thinking about their country club and playing golf. They are thinking about their community. And this is on both sides of the aisle. I will say we've got Democratic and Republican people here in the Lehigh Valley who have contributed so much. Yeah. And that's a huge thing to have.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a new slogan that I've kind of adopted for 2025, and it's community is the path forward. Beyond anything else, it's like we have to learn how to work together for the common good, because that's the only way that we're going to.
I will also add to that, because you're absolutely right. Community is where you can find your greatest support. I'm not talking about financial support. People are going through, a lot of people are worried about what's happening in this country right now and some of the things we're hearing in the news and so forth. And they often ask me, what's going to happen? And I always say, lean into your community. which also means your family, your close friends, but your community.
Yeah.
And and just getting back to the Latino community, that's one of the things that I was so incredibly impressed by in my time in Congress was how cohesive it was, how supportive of each other's businesses and families the Latino community was. I mean, the festivals and,
Got one coming up in May.
well, yeah.
A big one.
They used to be mandatory for me, and now I'll be going voluntarily. And,
Well, we'd love to have you.
But it's kind of nice to be able to go to these things and have fun.
Yeah.
And go because I want to go, and not because
Not because
it's
you
on my
have to
schedule.
expect it to go. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's so true. Well, Susan, it's been great to have this time to catch up with you, to share in our experiences and just hear about your support of our local community, our local Latino community. But of course, I can't let you go without asking you the one question.
Okay.
Is this the end of Susan in politics, or are you thinking about it?
This is not necessarily the end of Susan in politics. I am not running next year which is the next time my seat in Congress will be up in 2026. I'm not ruling out a future return to politics in some capacity. I will tell you, I really enjoyed politics other than the brutal campaigning, but I'm also really enjoying being able to operate at a different level. So I'm not ruling it out, but I'm not saying yes.
I'll
How's
take that. I'll take that. I'll take that answer. And with that, I just wanted to thank Susan again for being with us here on Somos Lehigh Valley. And thank each one of you for tuning in. We remind you, this is a weekly podcast that is brought to you by the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We hope that you'll join us next week. And remember, follow us on social media. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. Look for Hispanic Chamber of Commerce or HCCLV. And we'll see you next week. Till then, as we say every week, love, peace, and adobo.